Brendan Behan.
Brendan Behan. About a week ago, we wanted to rush this episode out for the man's birthday. And I'm glad we didn't. And instead spent a week reading and watching everything that we could to do with the man.
Well, you did most of it.
I got really
into when we were
engrossed.
going to do the original recording because I was like, I better know something. So I spent like 2 days quickly researching.
Yeah.
And then I went and started looking at spies.
You could have, but I've become an old Dublin. It's changed me. I'm walking around the streets of Temple Bar now, and it's a different old city. it's a terrible old city. I'm glad I spent more time researching about him because he's a bit of a bastard.
Oh, save that for part 2.
Part 2. He's very, very, very interesting man though. He lived a bizarre life. But interesting fact number 1. This is going to have a lot of tangents, some of which will be cut out and put onto the Patreon. But we'll see what happens. But Brendan,
Because we're straight into it.
I
forgot we didn't do an intro. We didn't do.
Don't need it.
We just watched 2 Father Ted clips.
Yeah, watch 2 Father Ted clips, a fucking pot of coffee. It's time to go.
I'm just up. I'm still in my pajamas. I can't find my boxers.
Yeah, and I'm hungover because some very nice podcast fans kept buying me pints yesterday.
Yes. Hello.
Hello,
Kurt and Maria.
It's not pronounced Maria, but I don't know what it is for
Maria. Mary. When you're here, it's Mary.
But Brendan Francis Behan, born in Dublin town on the 9th of February 1923, in the depths of the Civil War.
You want to do your Dublin accent?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lisa already pointed out to me last week that you can't do one, and it really annoys you.
I have a great Dublin
you
accent.
Get self-conscious about it.
She just doesn't like how my accent is so accurate for her people. Brendan Francis Behan was born in Dublin's old town on the 9th of February 1923 in the depths of the Civil War.
No, that's not right.
No, it's not. But people like to say it's the end of the Civil War. But people couldn't resist the fact that he was born during the Civil War. It seems poetic somehow.
Yeah.
Not really.
You forget as well that it's that, in my mind, he's older.
Yeah.
Like, born in 1923. I was going to say, like, if he had kept himself together, he could have been around now. Like, that's still a bit much.
No.
But, like,
so last Thursday was his 100th birthday.
But, like, when did he die?
When did he die?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, like, yes, he would have been probably in his 80s, plus than 90.
Yeah.
Like, Behan could have been around. We could have seen him on TV being interviewed.
We have seen him on TV.
No, I mean, like, in our lifetime, like, live. He could have been, like, the late
yeah.
show.
He would have probably died in, like, the early 2000s.
Had he not
been exactly the man. If he had changed every aspect of his life, maybe, yes.
From the age of 5.
Yeah. But, well, so that's the first, so his name is actually Francis. It's a classic case of he's christened Francis, but everyone just called him Brendan.
Yeah. Why do we do that?
I don't know. Well, later on, it comes in handy for him because I'd read in some cases that he was traveling on a false passport using the name Francis Behan. But now it just turns out it was his real name. And the other was his fake name.
Well, I know a lot of my uncles are like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
One of them's called Eamon, but we call him Sam.
Yeah.
And then he called his son Eamon. But not like Eamon Jr. or like Eamon 2. Back in the habit.
But whatever his name was, Francis Brendan, he was born into a big old Republican family. His mother, Kathleen, was also from a big Republican family. She spent time in the orphanage here in Inchicore.
Where's that now?
Up by Golden Bridge. Don't know, up at the cemetery there. It's probably not there still. It was 100 years ago. But she was there with her brother, her older brother, Pater Carney, more famously known as the man that wrote Ireland's national anthem.
The man what wrote the national song?
He wrote Soldier's Song, which turned into Aaron Levine.
Yes, and it replaced what was the...
Before that?
Yeah.
We didn't have a nation.
No, we had a song.
Yeah, we had a song.
We
It was called God Save the Queen.
No, we had one. That it was what the Ra used to use. Ireland's Call.
But yes, that's a good,
He's a nepo baby, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, well, that's only one side. Well, so before meeting Brendan's dad, Kathleen was married to Jack Furlong, who was also
before.
Yeah, well, this is another big Irish Republican family. He died from the Spanish flu. I'd heard a few, more of the most episodes. I've spent a lot of time listening to old Dublin men retelling parts of this story. And a lot of people are like, old Furlong, he was a 1916 man, and he died shortly thereafter. But he died of the flu. Unrelated to all of the Warrens. But the Furlongs are also...
What a genius idea that'd be. It's like, I'm sick. Bring me down to just the gates of Kilmainham.
Yeah.
He died the same week as all the boys. Whereabouts? Kilmainham.
Kilmainham. Yeah.
No, the jail.
Yeah. Bad strep. He just wasn't looking after himself.
So it was shocking what they did to him.
What they did to that man.
Charged him full price for a ticket.
So she had two sons from the previous marriage. Kathleen herself was an Irish ballad singer, political activist, and she worked as a maid for Maud Gonne for a while as well.
Okay.
So there's a weird kind of... Well, I'll tell you about his dad first. Then he's got like a weird sort of... Like all his work and all of his persona is very working class. And he did grow up and live in working class areas, but he also had like a weird... I don't know. Yeah, we'll see it after his dad. But his dad... Stephen Behan, also involved in the Republican movement. It's unclear how much he was in prison in Kilmainham at the time of Behan's birth. But I've heard stories that, like, obviously he's a bit mythologized, but people are like, he was one of Collins's 12, the assassin squad.
Yeah.
He was the man who burnt down the Custom House in Dublin. Like, there's all these stories. I don't know how he was involved in the Iran. He was involved in the War of Independence.
Was he one of the 12 with the squad? Was he one of the apostles?
No. I read that once in like some. I don't know, but he was around.
You don't know it's not, though.
I don't know he's not.
Yeah.
So we'll say yes, he is. He's a secret assassin hitman, but he was in prison in Kilmainham when Behan was born, and apparently they took the baby down to hold him up so that he could look through the prison bar cells and see his own son.
Ah, that's nice.
I don't know if that's true.
I was going to say, so Behan could see. He was like, well, he's just a child. He's not going to remember.
look at here, Sonny. This is where you're going to end up.
You're going to spend the majority of the next 24 years. Yeah. Get used to it.
Get used to that. But yeah, so Stephen, the father, he played the violin. He spoke a bit of Latin and French. Enjoyed the opera. And he read the classics to his kids. So he gave them an education in the Shakespeare and all that stuff that fancy Dublin men read at the time. He was a painter by trade and a trade unionist, but his mother, Christine English, aka Granny English.
Whoa.
I know, yeah. It's a pretty funny second name for this family. She was a landlord who owned... So they lived in a tenement house, but his mother owned the tenement house. So they were like all living there with like 20 other families. So it's a kind of weird, like, yeah, they are like, you know, North inner city Dublin working class, but they're also like involved in the Republican movement, and they live in a slum, but they're also slum landlords. So it's a weird kind of dynamic, I guess.
I'd say there's more. That's the best dynamic.
Yeah, you get the best of both worlds, or the worst of both worlds.
You're a man of the people, or the people of the people.
Yeah,
but you're highly educated.
Yeah,
so you can talk with an accent, and everyone think you're not faking it.
It worked out well
and
for him.
And you're smart, like a Healy Ray.
Well, they lived with 20 others. They lived on Russell Street in Mountjoy Square.
But do you ever think of that might be a thing with, I never caught anyone with it, but you know when you have, like, you move into a house with strangers, the thought ever come like, oh, one of the people here is probably the son or daughter of the person who owns the house.
Maybe.
You never want to be talking too much shit about a landlord, because their kid might be one of the people living there rent-free.
Yeah. I've never thought of that.
No, I've always thought about that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I knew one fella who was renting a room, so the landlord just put this fella in charge because he'd been there so long that he was like, you just take the rent from everyone, you pay me. And so then he was like, it's 3 new people. Great. He just upped the price of the rent for everyone.
Yeah.
And he just lived rent free. Landlord still got the same amount of money. He's like, yeah, Dublin, fucking landlords, man.
You gotta watch out for snakes.
They're not trying to help the working man.
Well, unlike that, Granny English was meant to be, I guess, fair with rent. She was a landlord, and one of those nice ones from time to time.
Who just like they'd charge you twice as much, and at the drop of a hat be like, you gotta get out. I've got a son who's gonna go to secondary school soon. He needs his own space.
My dad reminded me of my first landlord in Dublin when they were bringing me down to college. They went in to see the house, and we went in, and he had the tin of varnish open, and like the first two lats of wood inside the door. He's like, just watch your step there, love. I'm just about to finish up doing this. Now you're gonna get the whole place done. Nothing ever happened. I'd say you play that trick every year when the mothers and fathers are coming down. Just paint the first two lats of wood and be like, just watch your step there, the open can of paint. I'm just in the middle of getting this whole thing done here. The smell of paint and varnish. Yeah, the whole thing's gonna get there. Fucking, I'd say it's
fantastic.
He was such a cowboy. Anyway, so later on in life, Stephen was a surprise guest on the show This Is My Life. Did you ever hear of it?
Yeah.
It's the presenter Eamon Andrews. I think he just takes someone up and goes through their life, does a bit of an interview thing. But this was a surprise episode where Stephen Behan's in the crowd, and they walk up to him with the camera and whatever, and he sees that they're up on the screen. They're coming up to him, and he's like, "What you?" And Eamon Andrews puts the mic in his face and says, "What's your name?" Stephen says, "Surprise," and he just says, "Behan." Andrew says, "Yeah, to Brendan and Dominic Behan." He says, "Yeah, I'm married to their mother."
Just never give a straight answer.
Never give a straight answer, yeah. And he's saying, he's looking up at the screen, he's like, "Jeez, is that fucking me?" And then still being like, "Oh," like under pressure, all eyes on him. Probably the first time seeing himself on TV, and still just like, "Yeah, I'm married to the mother." So he's Behan's raised in an inner city working class family, but it's also heavily involved in the Republican movement, well educated, sort of landlords. This is interesting dynamic to grow up.
Almost too good crack.
Almost
you'd say that's you're better off now moving out to the country where things would be a bit more quiet.
Well, that's pretty much what happens, and then he spends his whole time idealizing and pining after the whatever 13 or so years he lived in a tenement in Mountjoy. Well, so his Granny English, the grandmother, she brought young Behan pinting at a very young age. He's about 6. He doesn't really remember. There's a quote from him saying he doesn't ever remember a time where he wasn't drinking. But we watched one of those documentaries, and there's a clip of Behan's mom, Kathleen.
Oh, it's fucking heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, because I heard the audio on a podcast first, on Donald Fallon's podcast.
Yeah, Three Castles Burning.
But I heard the audio on that, and it's pretty funny. Kathleen's being interviewed about her mother-in-law, Granny English, and they're kind of asking, how did she feel about, Granny English getting her son drinking at 6, 7, 8 or whatever. And listening to the audio, you're like, oh, yeah, she doesn't want to piss off the mother-in-law. She's tiptoeing around it. But then watching the documentary, that woman is scared.
She's like she's fear
shook.
of God from a lady who's definitely passed.
Oh, she's definitely dead. Yeah.
But she's like, I wouldn't want to fall out with her.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that was a great idea. But when you stop it, I wouldn't want to fall out with anyone.
Yeah.
Would you not stop it? Wouldn't have made a difference. He was always going to be like that.
I did not necessarily, but yes, they mentioned that she controlled the purse strings.
Yeah,
in
she had
that
the
interview.
money. Yeah.
So she was their landlord.
Yeah. But do you think that'd be like if a grandparent was going to be like, oh, I won't give you the money. They have to do this thing, like as in like he has to learn Irish dancing, or he has to go to this school, or he has to do the things that she wants. It's like her only stipulation is that I'll only give you the money if you let me ply my grandson full of drink.
Yeah,
like, I don't understand.
I know your rent's going up unless me and your 6-year-old boy go out drinking. I guess, yeah. But Brendan Behan, Francis Behan, in 1931, he started writing poems and stories at an early age. At 8, he became a member of Fianna Éireann, the Boy Scout group of like the anti-treaty IRA. He published his first poems and stories in their magazine Fianna, the Voice of Young Ireland.
That would be adorable. It's a bunch of like 8-year-old nationals.
Yeah, well, yeah. He was the youngest contributor, and
it must be like War of the Buttons.
Yeah. But at 13, he wrote a poem about Michael Collins.
Now you see, you've skipped. This is probably me listening to Donal on someone else, not his podcast though. But he was talking about a poem he wrote, like a love letter he wrote to a girl at the age of like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
You hear that one? And he was like, yeah, that's the balls of a man with like a historical lineage.
Yeah.
That's not first generation writing. No. Your dad's been smart.
Yeah, he had a great way with words, I suppose, from an early age. Yeah, he's submitting poetry and short stories into all these nationalist papers. most of his stuff. Yeah, I can't remember that poem. He wrote a poem for a girl in his class
Yeah.
because he'd done something
He
that
done-
she took the blame for it.
Yeah, but he said he liked her and he'd bring her out.
Yeah. It was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cute.
But at 13, he wrote a poem about Michael Collins called The Laughing Boy,
Yeah.
which was
'cause-
based on his mother's nickname.
Yeah, because she had an affair with him.
No. Don't sully this.
I'm just saying.
They were close personal friends,
Mm,
and she was very sad when he died.
yeah, all the ladies were sad when
She
Michael
went
Collins died.
to him for help when her husband was in prison.
Mm.
Help
Mhm.
with the bills,
Yep.
among other things. No, you're just making stuff up now. They were friends, and she called him the Laughing Boy, and yeah, it's a very short poem. It's kind of nice. It's just after he died, there'd be no more laughter or whatever. But this is one of the weird tangents. The Laughing Boy was later translated into Greek and became the unofficial anthem of resistance against the Greek junta in the 70s. It was translated by a Greek poet named Vasily Rotas and then set to music by the famous Greek composer Mikis Theodorakis. Now, he'll
Yeah.
come up later on. Do you know him?
No.
No. But it's mad. It seemed like it was... So it translated into To Yelasto Piedi.
Wait, Mika.
The jovial boy. No, not that Mika. You're thinking of the guys who built those houses in Donegal. It's mad. There's all this footage like after the junta gets kicked out in 1974. They have like these big concerts and everyone's singing the jovial boy, like the laughing boy. There was a TG Carrot documentary about it, but it was an hour and a half long and I'd run out of time.
No, that's fair.
But it's just how that poem tracked through Europe over like 50 years and became a Greek
Banger.
banger, yeah. They look like they were all going nuts. It's like an old rebel song for them.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh,
But despite early writing success in the Fianna, so yeah, he's like writing for the Fianna and all these, like the Voice of Ireland, Wolf Tone Weekly, which is a magazine. It's such a... This week in Wolf Tone Weekly, he's
the
still
devil
dead.
era Democrat.
Yeah. But so he's getting involved in all these, on the writing aspect of these like young Republican movement groups, but he gets kicked out of the Fianna at 14 for being drunk.
Wait, what?
Yeah, well, he's already been drinking for like 8 years at this point.
Yeah, but
They don't want rowdy, drunk 14-year-olds
what?
because they've got enough rowdy, drunk adults.
Yeah, and you have to train them in.
Yeah.
Is
so
he
he must
gonna
be
get
pretty...
get starred up then? Where you're like, you're too much crack for here. You got to go straight to the seniors.
Yeah. Yeah.
This man he'd been fighting with the men since he was 12.
He mightn't look much, but he can write and drink like the best of them. Get into the big leagues, kid. Well, in 1937, after Granny English died, the Dublin Corpo relocated the family from Mountjoy Square out to Kildare Road in Kimmage, Crumlin. It's not too far away from here.
The suburbs, as he called it.
Yeah, like it's this. They may as well be in Leash. Like it's the countryside at the time.
They say you can walk from there into town.
Yeah, Jesus, you
Uh,
couldn't. You might die.
In about an hour.
I don't think we fully appreciate how much Dublin people don't trust the countryside.
Mm.
I heard a great line the other day of like just someone saying the only way I've left Dublin is by the airport. Like people, Jam who used to live here, he had a great he used to work with a proper dub who just couldn't like conceptualize. He offered him some chocolate or something one day and he's like, man, I'm not being funny, but like, where'd you get that from? He's like, what? Like, did you get it in like a Dublin shop or like, did you get it down the country, like when you were back home or whatever? He's like, I don't know. He's like, because I don't eat anything from the countryside.
Like it had been gone off for years.
No, he's just like, I'm not being funny. Like, no offense, I just don't trust that stuff. And I think it came up as well about like meat. He's like, I only get my meat from Dublin butchers. He's like, where do you think that comes from? He's like, what? It's not from all the fucking Dublin cows you see around the place.
The city cows. What are you
like,
talking about?
Oh no, fucking, it's just the Dublin butchers. Like, just lads. I have no friends of mine who've referred to Houston as the Culchie train station. Like the rest of the country may as well not exist.
Yeah.
And I guess at this time, moving to Crumlin, like it's fields. It's not the real Dublin.
Yeah, because I suppose that's what. I don't like Tala's even further away, but you hear people talk about like the lack of amenities when they were setting that up, and then Crumlin and that probably would have been the same just years before. And
Yeah.
it's closer to town. You can walk in, but if there's nothing in between that, just like people say that about Ballymund, that they used to put us up there. It takes us an hour and 15
Yeah.
to walk into town to do anything.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's nothing in between. I guess like Drumcondra, Phibsborough.
And you're removed from your communities. You're given a house, but if you're not living in a rundown slum with 20 other families, are you really living at all?
No is the answer.
No, it turned out it was the answer. So, again, we said that at start, I guess, but like he spends a lot of time, like he goes back to Russell Street a lot and kind of like, looks around and tries to relive his youth. It's not the same out in Crumlin. It's too cold. It's too corporate. But supposedly his dad said at the time.
But did it say what happened? Because Granny English owned the tenements. So
Yeah.
she passed on. What happened to the money?
I don't know. I guess that sort of way they're like, it's 1930s. Like I guess people shouldn't be living in tenements anymore. But it was like the government built houses and they're like, what if you all move out here? And they're like, I hate this country. What have you done to me?
It's the same thing years ago when like they were trying to move out. I don't know the name of the plan. Shouldn't call it a plan. Whatever the strategy
Scheme.
was. Yeah, scheme.
Yeah.
But to get like Dublin people to move down the country.
Yeah. I'm not being funny, but like I don't know what's out there.
I don't know what's out there, but
Yeah.
we'd have had a good lot of Dublin lads move down. Just like go down the country. It's cheaper.
Yeah.
You can still have a job. It's an hour to Dublin. You don't have to live in a 1-bedroom apartment with a family of 5. It's perfect.
It sounds
None
like
of
hell.
them. No one wanted it.
No.
Every single. And in fairness, I'd get it. Any of the young lads came. They were like, they could, instead of being 12 and selling cocaine in Temple Bar, having to crack with the lads, having a horse shifting some American girl.
Yeah.
Remember that happened the other week?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. That's great.
That is great, yeah. But yeah, so they're all moved out to Crumlin, out to these new fancy estates. Behan's dad supposedly said that Dublin's working class are being sent to hell or to Kimmage.
Yes. Yeah.
Good line.
It's a good line.
That also might not have been ever said. I don't know. I mean, they're all good with words. They probably did say some of these things. Yeah.
It's not that. It's a good line. It's not
line,
that great. Yeah.
It's pretty good. And
It's
not
a very
like-
well-known Irish phrase
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you just switch the. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he did become world famous for his use of words, so it would make sense that he could come up with that line.
Yeah.
Okay. But the family set up a home out there in Crumlin. They're still working away on their political activism. The house is called the Crumlin Kremlin.
Oh.
Yeah. Because the house is in Kimmage, but it's called the Crumlin Kremlin because it's better than the Kimmage village, or I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it's probably halfway between the two, I guess.
Are they in? Is it Kimmage or Crumlin?
It's in Kimmage, but it's referred to as the Crumlin Kremlin. It's both. I guess it's the same general neighborhood. But like in Inchicore, Kilmainham, you can just lie.
You can, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to.
Do you?
For alliteration.
For on postage, I
Yeah.
always say like, yeah, in Shakur when I meet people.
Yeah, it depends. It was joked. I don't know how much of a joke it was, but they'd tell stories about on the house there was a picture of Lenin, Marx, and Jesus, all up on the wall. They're all like left-leaning Republican communists, socialists.
We've lost that now over the years.
What? Just
our love of Russia.
yeah, that's true. Well, even his brother.
We had a good history of loving Russia.
His brother Brian, who was in the Communist Party in England, he loved Russia, went over to Russia to meet Joe, and then he left the party in the 50s. Was like, you know what, Russia's not good crack.
Yeah.
It kind of hasn't been for a while.
Far away hills
Yeah, but I mean,
are evil.
When's the Russian Revolution? Like 1917, and it's like the first workers' revolt. You can see how these people were like, socialist revolutions
the
would have
French.
been fascinated by them. Yeah, it's like the French.
Yeah, for years people were like, yeah, we love the French as well.
Yeah.
There's a revolution. Then you spend 5 minutes with a French person. You're like, do you know what?
I'd revolt as well.
Maybe they shouldn't.
Bring back the king. But exactly. And the 1800s, the French are like the gold standard for, liberty, fraternity, whatever. And in the early 20th century, Russia's like, Jesus, fuck, you can do that? You can be a working man and also have a bit of a life? Well, so when they're living in Crumlin, Behan leaves school to become a painter, following in his grandfather's trade. He becomes a painter. He also follows his father into the business of blowing lads up. And in 1939, at the age of 16, he joins the 2nd Battalion of the IRA.
Mm-hmm.
He continues to write, though. He gets his work published in the Republican paper Unpublished. And like any good IRA man at the time, he tries to go off and fight in the Spanish Civil War, but I think they talk him out of it. There was the interviews with his dad and his uncle and stuff where they were like, they convince him not to go, or maybe, I don't know, it doesn't work out anyway. But instead of going to Spain to fight in the Civil War, he sends himself off on an unsolicited solo mission to Liverpool to blow up either the docks or a battleship. So he goes over with a suitcase full of bombs. And again, there's like different reports. Everywhere I read this was different, but he gets arrested pretty much straight away. I read within 10 hours, within a day. Like I don't think he gets anywhere near the docks.
There's a drunken, fat-faced Irish teen who's kind of angry with a suitcase that's ticking.
Yeah, like he's not subtle. Like we talked about it in some other episodes, but like Operation S, like the sabotage plan, England's on high alert. Like we just did an episode about the spies that they had in the 1880s and 70s, like the network of spies. 1930s is a decade of like, well, not a decade of, but the area bomb in England. They're on the lookout for exactly this sort of thing. Like a 16-year-old angry, drunk Dublin teenager who's traveling by himself, probably with no papers, like no job.
Have you been kicked out of any underage Republican groups for being too hardcore? You got me.
So they pick him up pretty quickly. They try to get him to flip, but he's no grass. He goes.
Also, I guess there's not. Well, so that's my question then. Was it unsolicited, or was he? Was he told to go do it and didn't rat anyone out, or did he actually decide to go do it himself?
I don't know.
Because that's an easy way to be like, he went on what's the word? Is it unsolicited or
unsanctioned?
Unsanctioned. There's the word.
He went rogue.
Yeah. Or was he told to do it and then just didn't rat anyone out?
I don't know. I imagine he probably wasn't told to do it because they would have been a better organization. But well, do you remember in one of those documentaries, his dad is talking about it, I think, and he's like, yeah, he implies that he did it himself. But maybe they would.
It was only a Mickey Mouse attack.
It was only a Mickey Mouse. Well, it is treated pretty lightly. So he's tried. He's tried anyway. Put on trial for like trying to blow up Blighty, and he's sentenced to 3 years in Borstal, which Borstals are the sort of underrated. It's like juvie.
Juvie, yeah.
Yeah. So this one in particular was the Hullsley Bay Borstal Institution in Suffolk. But 3 years for like attempted explosion.
Yeah, people probably didn't live as long back then, so 3 years is like...
Oh, they're walking around with suitcases full of bombs.
You say that now, but like in Ireland, you're like, what's he getting? He's like, he savagely beat a woman in public, and he robbed her, and then he just non-stick. Or the guy the other day, I saw some lad who had like 164 previous convictions.
Yeah.
And they're like, his defense was that I had a tough childhood and I'm turning it around.
Yeah.
Like, and you said that the last 163 times?
I'm still turning it around, Your Honor. Listen. Well, yeah, 3 years. I suppose he's underage, and it's his first offence, Your Honor.
But it's here then he gets a love of, or he likes the English, or he can see.
Yeah.
He's like, some of these English boys are kind of sexy. Maybe they got something right.
But so it was run by a man called Cyril Joyce, and Behan starts to realize, I suppose it seems stupid now, but it probably is, like, he just starts to realize he was misled about the Sassenach, the English people. He grew up thinking that they were the enemy, and he slowly realizes in his time here that, like, you know, he still hates the establishment and the royals and all that sort of stuff. He's like, yeah, these people, like, he's meeting all these people from Manchester, Liverpool, working English towns in the north of England. He's like, yeah, these are the same people as me. He's a quote about, like, all our mothers had all done the pawn, pledging on Monday, releasing on Saturday. We all knew the chip shop and the picture house and the fourpenny rush of a Saturday afternoon and the summer swimming in the canal and being chased along the railway by the cops. It's just like, he's more in common with them than I suppose he was led to believe growing up in a very, very Republican family where, like, at 16 they head off with a bomb to blow up a country you'd never been in.
Yeah.
And then he ends up in prison. He's like, oh yeah, all these lads are very like me, and also they look class.
You're describing like Dances with Wolves.
Yeah,
like Behan,
Avatar.
Yeah, Behan goes over. What? I've been wrong all along.
Yeah.
Let me become one of you. Let me learn your ways.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the same.
It's the same. Yeah. But
this is with a little bit more cricket.
it's an eye-opening experience for him anyway. But so his notions of England are shock. His notions of religion also shock. I think I can't remember which of his plays he talks about it in, but basically, like, the church in the 1930s is excommunicating people for being in the IRA. So he considers himself quite religious, but I guess he's considers himself an IRA man first and a Catholic second. So it's a formative time for him now. He's kind of losing, not his religion, but I guess losing faith in the church. Yeah, and losing. What does he believe in anymore? He can't hate the Brits. The church isn't there for him. But this all becomes inspiration for one of his major works, The Borstal Boy. It's also his sexual awakening, as we've already mentioned. He was definitely bisexual. I guess we were talking about this yesterday, but it's funny, like, at different points you go back and look at his style, like reading different accounts about him from different eras. I think it was in the 19th, like this stuff comes from his biographer, Ulick O'Connor. And he mentioned that he was bisexual in the 70s. And people, they weren't happy.
Oh, no.
How could a brave Republican, writing, fighting, drinking man be a bisexual man? And then in the 90s, someone else released more books with different accounts. It's like, oh yeah, it wasn't even a secret. Like, people knew he was gay at the time. But it's the same as Roger Casement.
Yeah. There's a load.
There's
Pierce and
yeah, but it's just that they can't wrap their heads around it. And it's funny, like, when you're kind of, you hear bits of it and you're like, yeah, there was kind of rumor, they heard an old tale that he might have been gay, and nothing was ever proved. Then you read into it more, it's like, oh, there's just loads of letters and accounts, and like he was gay. He was a bisexual man. There's no but apparently a lot of it was his sexual awakening was in Borstal, apparently, and a lot of the men he would like for whatever. A lot of the men he'd fuck later in life would be sort of the archetype of the like young working class, lean, fit men. Although now that I'm saying that out loud, I've seen people make that point as if it was kind of like, he was interested, when he was in prison, it's kind of set in the mind the sort of man he'd like is, what was it, attractive, strong, young men. Was that his type? Yeah. It's interesting. It was his burgeoning state. He just liked young, attractive people because of his time in prison. Interesting insight there. But yeah, so this is the point. This isn't funny, but
you're saying that now.
His brother Brian,
you can't contain yourself.
His brother Brian, the communist, he was sent to a boys' prison in Artane. He stole money from his neighbor's gas meter, and he was sent to prison in Artane and like just suffered horrible sexual and mental and physical abuse for years, and it like kind of ruined his life. And then Behan like tried to blow up a Liverpool dock, and he gets sent he gets sent to summer camp. He's just hanging out, just having sex with lads, and he writes one of his great works. So the guy robs a fucking couple of coins, and it just ruins his life.
It's the electricity, man.
When you're on about unfair sentences
from your own people, he's trying to take from his own people.
He tried to rob his neighbour, and it just sent him to some Catholic institution where he got the shit kicked out of him for years and scarred mentally. And fucking Borstal Boy there goes off to like have his sexual awakening and hanging out with loads of fucking lads who love chips. Oh. It's not funny, but it's
no, yeah, it's not funny.
It's not funny, but God, that is, yeah, is just. I read a bit of it. His story is like, it's just a harrowing
sliding doors moment.
Yeah. When they met up afterwards after getting released from prison, it was like, yeah, prison's not so bad. Don't send me back.
Oh, it was shocking. Yeah, me too. It was terrible.
But he was Brendan Behan was released from prison and deported back to Ireland in November of 1941. He was only back in Ireland a wet week when in April of 1942 there was an Easter Rising commemoration ceremony in Glasnevin, as there was every year. And then there's different accounts of this. So basically there's a Garda presence at it. It's a Republican procession to mark Easter Rising. So there's a Garda presence at it. Behan says that he saw a guard who looked spooked and looked like he was going to use his gun and shoot at someone. So Behan stepped in and grabbed the gun off him and shot at him.
Now I've heard he later said that he was locked when he did it.
I assume he was, yeah.
And but then there's plenty of accounts seemingly of people have been like, yeah, no, that's just what he was like. He was very lucky that he didn't kill one of them, or else that was him locked up for life.
Oh yeah.
But that's like, he was just a hothead
Yeah.
who was making terrible decisions. And even though he was a big Republican,
Hmm.
the lads involved in the paramilitary side of things were like, you can't trust that gobshite.
No,
He's great with words and he's a load of crack. He's clearly a lunatic.
he's a lunatic. Well, like he's out of prison like 5 months. He's still very young, and
Let
he's
me
just
back into that.
well, yeah.
The best time of my life.
He's what's the old lad in Shawshank Redemption? I mean, he tries to go. I was just sitting in prison, we were hanging out all day, riding young lads around the clock. I'm gonna shoot a guard and get back in there. But in that documentary again, like they ask his dad about what happened. And his dad just like, would you go to shoot someone? Would you stop? She couldn't shoot the barracks he was born in. No, it wouldn't have been the type of him. Even if he did pull the trigger, he never would have hurt anyone. He did shoot at the fact that he didn't hit him does seem like it was like he could have easily shot him.
Yeah, it was just an accident. Like, it was an
accident.
It was he missed.
He missed, but it whether he intended to or not. But the idea of like he wouldn't harm a fly. He went to prison for trying to blow up a boat.
Yeah,
like,
and then shot at a man.
And then this is the first thing he does when he gets out of prison is to shoot at a man. So well, that's whatever.
But does he have then? Obviously, there's like a want in him to be does he want to be seen as like a national, like a big figure in the nationalist movement, or like what is the? Does he just want to be famous?
Later on he kind of
Like, what's his crack? Because it's to flip between the two. Of like, because afterwards he'll talk for the rest of his life about the Republican movement, and different stuff. But he moves away from like in his youth. It's like, I want to be I want to be like a soldier.
Yeah.
Why?
But not really a soldier, because he doesn't really fall into any of the soldier, like the discipline and the.
No, he can't do any of that.
He wants to be a rogue. Like if he did go out unsanctioned to just blow up the thing, and now here he is just out of prison. This is, I guess, the IRA wants to see itself taken seriously as a military operation. So here they are out doing a march, procession, military stuff. The last thing they want is some drunk lad grabbing guns off the cops and shooting at them. That's bad for the image of them as a legitimate military force. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, is he just I suppose he grew up like his brother, his older brother is a famous Irish rebel songwriter. His dad went to prison for fighting against the treaty side. His mother's constantly singing him Irish ballads the whole time. His uncle literally wrote the anthem for the country.
His dad might be Michael Collins.
Like, he's grown up around all this stuff, and I guess he probably wants to, be a part of it, but also is drunk. Yeah. And doesn't know how to follow orders and that sort of stuff.
Also a teenager.
Yeah, at this stage he's like 20, I think.
I think he's like
19.
I thought he was like 16 when he.
He was 16 when he went to prison, so he got out 3
yeah.
years later. But yeah, he's 1942. He's born in 23. So yeah, he's still young, and a lot of his years were spent in prison and drunk.
Because he's only out for it's less than a year, isn't it? In this
5 months.
5 months.
Yeah, he's out in November, deported back, and he's in April of the next year. He's shooting at lads.
Yeah.
But so that's one account of it.
Well, come on, it's April.
It's April.
It's the Lord's month.
Yeah. So he went off shooting lads for Lent, and now it's time to make up for it. But this is from the court report from the Irish Times at the time. He was tried for the attempted murder of detective guards Martin Hanrahan and Patrick Kirwan. The court heard that another man, Andrew Nathan, was getting arrested by those two cops when Lasarian Mangan, whose name is only in this because it's amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. Lasarian.
Yeah. You thought Clarence Mangan was good. Not Lasarian.
Not Lasarian?
Maybe Lasarian. Lasarian.
Yeah, usually it has a Z in it for Lasarian, but that's
Lasarian's a religious movement, is it?
Yeah.
The Lasarian brothers.
And my primary school.
But anyway, it's probably a religious name. Anyway, he pulled a gun on the cops. Behan was heard to run up behind them shouting, "Use it! Use it! Give it to me and I'll shoot the bastards!" So Mangan threw the gun to Behan, who fired at the guards. So I don't know what day that was, but then he was spotted the next night by the guards, and he pulled out his gun at them and ran off. And then the following night, so it was the 10th of April, he was arrested then. He was sentenced to 14 years in Mountjoy prison for attempted murder. So this is a big boy sentence now. He's tried as an adult, because he is an adult, I guess. But he's in Mountjoy prison for a year, then he moves to Arbor Hill for another year, and eventually is sent down to the Curragh camp in Kildare to be interned with all the other IRA men. So it's here I suppose they say that about regular criminals as well. Like, sometimes jail is reforming you.
Sometimes it's sending you into like just be surrounded by
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
You're
your peers.
sending him down to the Curragh so he can basically get what he wants.
Exactly. You know, he's surrounded by all these other lads who he idolizes, and like, all Republican lads who've been sent to prison for shooting cops and blowing up stuff and all the stuff he's interested in. But here he learns more Irish. They refer to it as the jail talked. So the jail talked. So he spoke Irish with a prison dialect. I think he'd spoken a bit of it as a child. I'd read somewhere that he was sent to the Gaeltacht as a kid, but I don't think that makes sense.
Sent to the gate. No, he would have hated the country.
I don't know. I don't think it makes sense. There's a Gaeltacht in Meath, but anyway, he learns Irish here at this point. He's fluent in Irish in later life. But before the Curragh, in Mountjoy prison, there've been rumours of his writing skills out and about. There's a young boy in Mountjoy, and he's good with a pen.
And he can write his name and more than just an X.
So they sent in the
He's
Irish,
got 2 X's.
the Irish writer Sean O'Faolain,
Hey.
who printed an early version of his Borstal Boy work called I Became a Borstal Boy. So he printed that in The Bell in June of 1942. The Bell, famous Irish literary magazine at the time, where like all the big boys were getting printed.
It is mad that now, like there's none of that anymore. Pretty much any story from that we do from like the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah.
Anyone in it is like, and they wrote for an Irish Republican
Yeah.
paper. And now if someone told you that they're like, here's a pamphlet, here's a newsletter.
Yeah.
It's all Irish Republicans
Yeah.
that are all writing their thoughts. Here's the ramblings of a 19-year-old who's gone to jail for trying to blow up at the Liverpool docks and shoot a man.
Yeah. What has he got to say about the movement? Something profound, no doubt. Yeah, I was in prison and I figured that the Englishmen are actually quite handsome and not that. Get him out of here! Get him out of here!
The last time someone gave me a newsletter or a leaflet was when I just came home last year, and I was down in Kilkenny helping my brother move house, and a lad walked by and he was like, do you want to take this? I was like, sorry man, I've got my hands full. He's like, don't worry. And he folded it up and he put it in my back pocket.
Yeah.
Like a nice little arse grab.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder what that is. And it was all COVID numbers he was denying.
Nice. Very good.
It was great. It was a nice little tiny arse pinch.
Yeah.
And then just a load of numbers that are worth looking into. Misspelled. It's difficult to misspell numbers.
But he managed it. Behan sent to 14 years prison for shooting at 2 cops. And he's released after 4 years during a
amnesty.
Wider IRA amnesty, which in 1946, I don't know, World War II's over, and they're like, you know what? I know it wasn't ye, but you're off the hook as well.
Mm-hmm.
Get out there.
You're lucky there.
Yeah, I'm not really sure I don't know why that was. Did the IRA just say they'd stop doing stuff? I don't know. But anyway, he's out of prison. So
that's a great for anyone like. You're in about 14 years. You be saying like life, and just randomly you just get a knock on the door, and be like, you're allowed to do drugs just for today.
Yeah,
like that one day that happened. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like it's a loophole. It doesn't. Or it's like that. What was your one? Brittany Grinner, the female basketball player.
Oh yeah.
And she went to Russia.
Prison in Russia.
Because she was caught with weed when she was playing in the basketball over there, and then to trade to get her back.
Yeah,
they let out the Lord of War from the Nicolas Cage movie. That guy, like one of the biggest gun smugglers. Like, incredible that she just smoked some weed, and now they're trading like one of the biggest fucking war crime.
She was definitely a spy.
She was a spy. Yeah.
That's my completely unfounded conspiracy theory.
Well, that's because they were asking, I remember at the time, that they were like, yeah, okay, we do have one of your main, okay, we will give him back, but we want her, and there's been an American soldier who'd been over there supposedly on holiday, which makes it sound like a spy. But he's like, he's been there for 5 years locked up. Can we have him as well? You can have her.
You can have the basketball woman, all right, and don't push your luck. We need that war smuggling man because of Ukraine.
That is mad though when that happened. That you're like, the army guy's still in there and he's been in there for 5 years. She was in for like 5 months, and they're like, we will trade this like huge criminal.
Yeah.
For having done something that people in America are still locked up for doing. And they're like, yeah, she did something in a different country that we still lock people up for in this country, but we're going to trade a man who should be locked up for the rest of his life. What is the world?
It's a fun place where you can tell fun stories about lads who were released from prison for no reason. But now he's out of prison. It's 1946. He's pretty much set now. He's done a stint in English prison, which united him with the working class British man and opened him up sexually. He's done a stint in Irish prison, which surrounded him by a load of Republicans and taught him Irish. And now he's making connections in the literary world. He's making shapes.
Yeah, his brother must have been...
Yeah,
he's like,
his brother's singing songs.
Yeah, now he'll see it. An Irish prison. Yeah, now he'll see what it's really like. And he walks. He's like, Jesus, it was just pints and songs.
It was just. It seems like at the end of Game of Thrones, where like Jon Snow is sentenced to go. His punishment is to go up to the wall with all of his mates. It's like, you go back up there to where you were happiest and found yourself a family, and you stay up there as their king. Why do you just go to your prison? To just be sent down to fucking Kildare, a lovely country, to hang out in the Curragh with a bunch of like-minded Republican soldiers just smoking cigarettes and singing songs. It's a great old life. But so he's out of prison. He gets back into his trade. He's working as a painter. He works as a seaman as well, as part-time smuggler. You know, he supposedly quits the IRA as well, apart from a brief attempt to break a lad out of prison in March, which sometimes gets overlooked.
I was looking into that as well.
Yeah.
Just no one really. It's another one. They tried to cast it aside because they're like, it was only a small bombing. He didn't really mean to try and shoot that man. He was a fly. He wouldn't hurt a fly. He's grand. Don't worry about it. It was like, you're leaving out a lot of things that he also did.
He also did, and like he got a massive lucky break here. He got 10 years shaved off a sentence, and then within
it's a few months, isn't it?
It's it is. It's within like a year anyway. He tries to break out an IRA man from a Manchester prison, and gets sentenced to 4 or 5 months in Strangeways jail. Which has come up a good few times. But once he got out of Strangeways, now he's done for good, for real. Apart from spending another month in Mountjoy the following year when he assaulted a police officer. Mm-hmm. But after, he barely meant
that was just
a
little holiday.
That was just a little... He really doesn't like the cops. That's a common thing in his life as well.
No, I don't say who does, but like at the time in Ireland as well, I bet that there would have been the lasting idea of the Dublin police having been basically the Brits.
Maybe.
That it's not like the same as any other country where it's like, America's a bad example, but like they're only here to protect you. Don't worry, they're nice guys. Which that's not true. But in Ireland, it's like, these are lads who have been hired by your captors, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
So like you would have had that.
To be honest, I think it's more the fact that he's just drunk a lot and is in prison a lot of his life. He doesn't like the establishment.
They won't leave me alone. You don't have pants on. Why is it always me? Because you don't have pants on. I'll fight any man. I will burn this bin.
But when he gets out of prison that time, he goes to Paris in August of 1948. So to get to France from Ireland in those days, especially the way he was doing it, which I think is just hopping on boats for free, because he's around seamen a lot.
Oh.
So he knows a thing or two. But to get busy, he had to go through England, which he's not allowed to do because he's barred from the country.
His idea was like, just don't buy a ticket, get on the boat. Worst case scenario, you get there, no one discovers you. Best case scenario, you get caught, French jail.
It's just ticking off jails. But yeah, so this is the bit. Yeah, he's traveling through England on a fake passport where he's named Francis Behan. They only realize it's him after he's left the country, but he's probably just traveling on his actual passport. Probably is Francis Behan.
Yeah, but this happens a good bit. We've done stories about lads who like, a fake name. They'll still use.
Oh yeah,
either their first or surname. They're like change both names.
It's so that when someone says Behan, you recognize the name. So you don't have to remember two names.
It's still madness.
But Paris was the place to be for post-World War II intellectual types. everyone was gathering together there for a good old existential think about what had led us to World War II. Where did we go wrong?
Probably the sanctions.
Yeah, from maybe the Treaty of Versailles. I don't know if that's the route they were going down, but yeah, like Paris is just after being liberated from the Nazis, the place has been bombed to shit, and all these freeloading philosophers and thinkers and artists move over there. So he's meeting Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and other fancy French people.
Mm-hmm. Thierry Henry.
It was a great place to be a writer as well. As his biographer Ulick O'Connor, he had a good line about Paris at the time being a place where you're not accepted as a writer unless you produce stuff. Which seems like an obvious statement, but
I've been thinking about that since I'd heard, like, for the last week.
It's a great line.
Yeah, good, but it is mad how that really stuck with me over the last week. It's like, you just have to actually do something before people will think that you do that thing.
Yeah.
But that's like, how many years have you spent doing comedy where you're able, for the first couple of years, you don't tell anyone?
No.
That, and if someone says, oh, they do comedy, you're like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
But like, you'll meet people, I'm a musician, or I'm a writer, or I'm XYZ. You're like, can you show me any of the things that you've...
Yeah.
You're a 30-year-old man, and you're telling me
yeah.
that you're this artist and you can't produce a single thing.
Yeah. So he's obviously written stuff for like magazines and that, but he's like, he identifies as a writer, I suppose, and he sees himself as a writer. But when he moves to Paris, he's like, right, well, fucking write something.
Yeah,
then.
you gotta write.
You can't be just saying that you're a writer. But the one thing that kind of lends him credence is that, I think, because I had in my head when I was reading this Paris phase, where he's just like some Dublin lad who hasn't done anything, and he's like, I'm just fucking moving over to Paris, man, just to be with the artists, to be with the thinkers, because they're writers like me. He has been in prison for most of his life for being a Republican. So that does sort of learn, like, he's had an interesting life.
Yeah.
And he has, like, you know, not that it's good or anything, but he did go try and blow up a dock that time. Like, he has, you know, he's doing stuff. And he has convictions. And prison convictions.
I was going to say, the courage of your convictions.
Yeah. But like, he's...
Remember that time you tried to blow up a dock when you were 16? I need that kind of courage.
Yeah. But he's, you know, he's lived this sort of life. But
yeah, but that is that classic, you know, like, you hear comedians say it a lot. You're like, man, you know, you need to have seen some stuff. You need to have lived. You need to have, like, some trauma or whatever before you can really be funny or, like, have something to talk about.
No.
And I've always been like, that's bullshit. You can just go and be funny. You can go write, like, most novels aren't true. People just come up with them and go write it. You just go do that. And then you hear about a lad like this. They're like, oh, what has he done? Oh, right. Yeah, maybe you do need...
Well, it's more...
Maybe it would help. You'd have
help.
You'd have more to draw from just to the fact that you're like,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he did spend like 9 years.
It's the only thing in my head, though, that stopped me being like, he's just some idiot from... Like, to move over and be hanging out with all these great names of the existential movement and all. Like, he's hanging out. So he's going over to... He meets up with Norman Mailer there, the American author. He was back on some GI Bill. He met up with him briefly there. I think he meets him again in Later Life in New York. But his main obsession... and his main reason for Paris is Samuel Beckett.
Yes.
He loves Beckett.
He wants to meet Andre the Giant.
An American by the name of Richard Seaver had published some Beckett thing in his magazine, and Behan had tracked down Seaver to see how he could find Beckett, which seems like a roundabout way of doing things. But Seaver in his biography later wrote that during his first meeting, Behan said, I miss Joyce. I hate that fucking Yeats. Flann O'Brien leaves me cold. He's so fucking Irish. The same goes for John Milligan Singe, who stuck his fucking ear to the fucking wall to overhear the peasants really talk, then put it in his fucking plays as though he'd made it up himself. Damn thief. Anyway, from what you wrote about Beckett, he sounds like the real thing. So tell me how to find him. Which is great. He put his ears against the walls to hear peasants talk and then pretend that it was his own.
But the way that he said his name, it's like John Milligan Singe. Like, he is annoyed because that's or else he would have just used his initials.
I thought
it's like he's a man been given out to.
Yeah.
Kevin Johnstopher Larney. What is your middle name?
John.
Is it?
Yeah, Johnstopher. John J.M. Singe. What does the J.M. stand for? John Millington. That's good. I don't know how true that is either, but it's pretty...
So he didn't like anyone?
Yeah, although Flann O'Brien was meant to be his friend, so...
He said he was cold.
He leaves him cold. He's so fucking Irish. But, like... I suppose being stuff isn't, very Irish, but, yeah. Anyway, whether that happened or not, he kind of had this idea that like Beckett would. So yeah, he starts off that rant a bit and say like, that he missed Joyce. He was too late for Joyce in Paris, but he kind of has this idea that Beckett will receive him the same way that Joyce received Beckett. He kind of sees this as his
The balls.
yeah. See, and this goes back to the idea of him being just some lad. So he hasn't really written that much stuff. He's written bits for Republican papers and that. He's lived an interesting life, but when he's in Paris, he's like going to the Latin Quarter where Oscar Wilde dies. He's writing a lot about him. He's writing a lot about Joyce. He's writing mostly in Irish, I think, at this time, his poems. But he wrote a poem when he was there called Gratitude to Joyce. And it's just about him being rat drunk in an Arab pub in Paris. And like people are buying him drinks because he's talking about Joyce and they all know Joyce. And he's kind of trading off his name. You know, like he's talking about Joyce and that he's from the same city as Joyce. And that like lads are buying him drinks and stuff. And in the poem, he's basically like, yeah, you know, if the roles were, if I was born first, you know, it'd be you sitting in a pub getting drinks bought for you, talking of the great Behan. Like he's 26 at this time, and again, he hasn't done anything really. He's nuts.
Yeah,
but he sees himself as the spiritual successor to Beckett and Joyce.
But like 99.9% of people who would have that way of thinking.
Oh yeah,
lunatics who, if they meet the person,
yeah,
they don't have the time of day for them. That they're like, just the fact that you think like that.
Yeah,
you've tracked someone down. You've gone on the hunt for someone.
Yeah, I've read some of his work in an article. I think we're going to be best friends. But so in Paris he meets.
Like that's the kind of person who ends up shooting the artist.
Yeah, that's usually how these things end up. It would be fascinating to find out how many people have like done this same thing.
He never meant to shoot him. It was he wouldn't hurt a writer. He was just trying to get his attention.
So in Paris he met Sinbad Vale, the son of Peggy Guggenheim of the Guggenheim art collectors. So Sinbad had gone to fight in the war. He thought, this is shit crack. When I get back home and the war is over, I'm going to start my own publishing company. I'm going to print writers and artists in English and French that haven't been published before. Give them a shot. So he starts his magazine, Points Literary Magazine, in 1949. It's apparently a big deal in retrospect. And the French love Irish rebels. Again, going back to like they're the trendsetters of revolution and liberty and all that sort of stuff. They love 1800s Irish ballads. So when this young drunk man who knows all the old Irish songs and has been to prison for being an Irish rebel comes along, Sinbad takes a liking to him. He prints some of his stuff in his Points magazine. The Points magazine publishing house is in the same building as Beckett's publishing house, so they do meet through that. But I also heard that he was staying, all of that story might be untrue as well, because he was staying with Beckett's cousin at some point.
He's just doing anything he can.
Yeah, but apparently they do meet and they become like their friends.
Who would have thought it, having wormed his way into the same literary building, living with his cousin?
They do bump into each other,
walking behind him within 15 feet for a year.
But yeah, so now he's doing it. He's getting stuff published a bit. He's living in Paris, so he's surviving as a journalist there, as well as like doing house painting. But it seems like an interesting, like the way that people describe it is just like, you know, bombed out cafes, everyone just hanging around, smoking cigarettes and talking about Inouï. Like it seems like an interesting place for an artist, but he's doing a bit of painting to get by. Apparently he also wrote porn.
Someone's gonna say, did you mean Ennui?
Thierry Ennui.
Mm-hmm.
His wife, apparently he also wrote porn to get by. And I think we both seen somewhere that like he was a pimp, but I think in retrospect that's more like,
no, I want to believe it.
No, but you know how people,
I want to see Behan walking around with a cane and a big purple top hat.
I think people said pimp back then to mean like he writing porn, he was being uncouth. He's nothing but a low down pimp. I think it was just because he was a smut peddler.
But what do we have any of the porn?
Not that I
for a friend.
Not that I could find. But I'm sure it exists out there.
This is a very good porno script, but where are the women? What?
I'd say he wrote some pretty good smut.
Oh, the dialogue.
Yeah,
The
very dialogue heavy.
Yeah.
So he's bouncing between Dublin, Belfast, and Paris. Returns to Paris in 1950 with his friend, the poet Anthony Cronin. Do you know him?
No?
Nah, I don't know. But
I can't get over it now. I'm just thinking about his dialogue in his porno script.
Yeah.
What would some of it be?
Yeah.
Where would you like me to finish? I can finish here, but leave shortly after.
And just imagine people like, flipping to the good bit. Just like read this 5 or 6 pages in before anything happens. Oh,
It's easier to carry on.
it is easy to do carry on stuff. That's true. Like, I got very excited the other day when you came back and asked what's the difference between a quiche and a tart. Oh, who are steady on. But I only brought up Anthony Cronin for this.
I said because you can take a quiche home to your mother.
Maybe your mother. But I only brought up Anthony Cronin there because for this next story. In October 1952, the Leader magazine published an unsigned and unflattering article about one Patrick Kavanagh, basically calling him a cantankerous old bollocks.
Was this the one that he sued over?
Yes, this is the one he sued over. So Kavanagh takes a libel case against the paper for defamation. So it's heard in like 1954. The paper is defended by John Costello that we talked about. So basically, he sues the paper for calling him a miserable old bastard, and the paper takes the case to trial and gets the former Taoiseach to defend the case and prove in court that he is the cantankerous old bastard.
In fairness, Paddy.
In fairness. Exhibit A.
Paddy, come on, it's Patrick. I mean, for fuck's sake.
So I can't... I want to do this trial separately as a different episode at some point, but basically Costello backs Kavanagh into... He's grilling him for like hours, and he backs him into a corner on the Behan issue, which isn't really important to the case, but it kind of sets him up as a liar and cantankerous, because he keeps saying, like, me and Behan were never friends. I'd never be friends with such a man. Because Kavanagh thought that Behan wrote the article, which he didn't. But he did severed contact with him. But Costello keeps getting him to like say that he wasn't friends with him. And then the next day, he produces a copy of Kavanagh's book, Terry Flynn, that was signed to Behan, where it said, "For my friend Brendan, poet and painter, on the day he decorated my flat." And that was a big...
What are you going to do then?
Yeah. So he'd spent all the previous day saying that he didn't even like it. But that wasn't even important to the case. That was irrelevant, but it was just setting up that, like...
It's proof that he's a liar.
Proof that he's a liar and proof that he doesn't like his old friends. But of course, so years later it came out that it was Brendan's half-brother. Everyone assumed it was Behan that gave him the book because, it's a book signed to Behan.
Okay.
Where, who else would have it? But it turned out it was his half-brother, Rory Furlong, had given it into the courts. But for years afterwards, everyone assumed it was Brendan. It cost him his friendship with Anthony Cronin, who we just heard about. But he was like, his poet friend. But Cronin didn't believe that, like, Behan would swear up and down that it wasn't him that gave the book. But everyone kind of thought he'd just done Kavanagh dirty. Because Kavanagh loses the trial, he gets fined a load of money, and it kind of fucks him over. Although Costello got him a job in UCD then after that.
Damn.
To kind of make up for making a mug of him, which apparently was the happiest time of his life.
Well, when he's been made a mug of, or
when he was in UCD? I don't know. Lisa was telling me about it the other day. It just sounds like he was just a lecturer. I don't know what he was supposed to be doing, but he kind of go in and just start talking about stuff, and people would just come to sit in the lecture hall and listen to him.
I suppose we'll get into that would be in, maybe not in this episode, but when we get into his once he gets some success.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's like some of that, like, the real happy point in his life is just him going day to day to different parties, different lecture halls, just giving talks about writing when he wasn't writing. He's like, I wrote one thing and now I'm going to have 4 years of just drinking and telling people how to write.
Yeah. Yeah, this is when they're happiest of all. It's just when they're just talking and people are listening to them, which is how we're happiest as well. But the main reason Behan didn't write that article about Kavanagh was probably because the same month it was published, he was arrested in Sussex for evading his deportation order and travelling on false... He was back in England, basically, and they arrested him for... He's not meant to be there because of all the bombs he's done.
All the bombs. What's he doing there, though?
Just hanging out.
Hanging out.
Oh. Yeah. When he was arrested by the cops, they tried to get him to flip again. He's like, I'll explain everything, but not now. I'm hungover. So he spent a month in Lewes prison before going back to Paris to hang out with his friend Beckett now, whose play Waiting for Godot was being released that year. So he goes over, and there's some stories that may or may not be true of him just like being drunk in the Beckett's trying to practice for the production, get everything ready, and Behan's just there locked drunk, falling asleep, and then waking up in the middle of it and being like, what about this? I wrote for the papers.
What about okay, hold on, hear me out. What if he shows up at the end?
Yeah. Maybe it was the opposite way. He's like, maybe Behan was meant to play Godot and he was too drunk on the day. He's like, he'll be here. He will just keep the play going. He'll be here any minute now.
It turns out that actually worked pretty well.
And then second half, they're just fucking do it again. I don't know what. He's not here yet. He's off stage just drinking champagne. But now he's set. He's done. He's set to actually be a writer. In 1953, he writes his kind of first proper novel. It's called The Scarperer. It's a serial crime novel about the Dublin underworld, written in the Irish Times across like 30 weeks.
Yeah, it's a load of short stories, is it? Or
it's like a series. I guess it's like a chapter a week in the paper. That's what papers used to do, I guess.
Yeah.
But he wrote it under the pseudonym Emmett Street, which is pretty good. It's a street near where he grew up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of his first actual long form story that he gets published.
Yeah.
But in 1954, this is the start of it.
This is it now.
This is it now.
Because until now he's done radio plays, has he? By then,
I don't know.
Because I
don't think so.
Because it's like the porno and different bits and pieces when he's in France.
Yeah.
And then he comes back, and that's when he comes back from France saying, "Now I'm going to take writing seriously."
Yeah. I've been over there, and it turns out I was just saying I'm a writer. It turns out over there you actually have to write stuff. So knuckling, I'm just going to go to prison 1 or 2 more times, and then it's down to business.
But yeah, I think he was writing like radio plays and short 1-act plays and bits and pieces like that.
Yeah,
like it wasn't it wasn't like zero output and then the queer fella.
I'm making fun of him for like he's written stuff. Like he's even done a version of the Borstal Boy called like Then I Became a Borstal Boy. Like he's done articles and serial stuff, and he's written radio plays. It's not as if he's been doing nothing. He's written poems. Like he's been writing poems his whole life. But in 1954. His play The Queer Fellow debuts in the Pike Theatre, running from April to November. So
because
it wasn't allowed in the Abbey.
Yeah.
Well, no. You read the same thing. I heard this was afterwards. So after it did well, they tried to get into the Abbey, and they wouldn't let it into the Abbey. And they said it was because his brother was caught. He used to work in the Abbey, and he kept selling like communist magazines during the breaks. He was meant to be. He was an usher there, and he kept trying to sell the People's Manifesto or something. Like, no, you can't.
He's just walking up, putting COVID pamphlets in people's
Yeah.
It's
like, we don't want you in here. But I don't know. He tried to get into one of the big theaters anyway before. That was another sort of his connections. His uncle on one side ran the Queen's Theatre, was involved in the theatre.
But it's fun with that, with the Abbey. I don't know if it was in the last podcast we talked about with Martin McDonagh.
Yeah.
That he couldn't get into the Abbey.
Oh, yeah.
So then he went to the Druid Theatre in Galway.
Yeah.
And then, Druid then has like 6 Broadway or West End plays.
Yeah.
And it's just huge. And the Abbey's still doing this play was really big in the 1910s.
Yeah. Because they don't
do any of the new stuff.
Anything. Yeah.
It's like RT, but I think it's not true. It's probably not true with Father Ted and stuff, but that the amount of times they turned down things where great Irish writers or comedians went elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because they didn't get a shot on RT, and they're like, "Why don't you support them?" They're like, fucking.
It's not our job to take risks on new things. It's our job to put on another show about housing. People seem to like the housing.
Also, give us a show.
Yeah. But his uncle being involved in Queen's Theatre is another funny thing where it's like he's working class, man of the people, just like everyone else. But he does have these. He is from a sort of Republican dynasty, and he's got connections to the theatre and art world that other people wouldn't have had. But the Pike Theatre is meant to be the sort of underground punk theatre scene of the time. It's smaller, but it's running more risky stuff.
They're naked. They're spitting on the audience.
Yeah, it's fucking edgy. And that's where he brings his play. So it's supposedly written about Brendan Kirwan, a man from Offaly, who murdered his brother after he got out of jail, and he was sentenced to hang in June of 1943. So Behan had been in prison the same time Kirwan was being hung.
Okay.
So the story is, it's about capital punishment. And, well, this is one. So we read that when we were in Edinburgh, we both brought the same book with us. Yeah. Even though we had like one bag. We had fuck all space. We both brought the same book. And it was a tree.
I know you have the same copy of.
It was the same copy. It was
you have the same copy of Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test.
Oh, yeah. We just have the same books.
We just have to say,
throw them out and save space. But it was a combination of the choir fella, Borstal Boy, and maybe the hostage. But the choir fella is basically they're all hanging around in prison with a man who's due to be hung. And it's an insight into capital punishment, which were all controversial themes at the time. And the choir, like, one of the guys in prison is there for sexual deviation, and they never say exactly what it is, but it's kind of hinting at like homosexuality and stuff that were taboo at the time.
The other lad killed his brother.
The natural enough thing could happen to anyone, unlike this degenerate who's in prison for having consensual sex with another man.
But it's that then you realize when he got home and realized they were riding each other.
Oh, yeah.
So it wasn't just out of nowhere.
Oh.
It's like he killed the person because they were cheating. I think that's what it was.
Maybe, yeah. Well, so the real, or not Emma Kerwin, Brendan Kerwin, he got out of prison and moved back into the family farm that his brother had been running all these years. It's pretty funny. I
find myself here trapped behind these bars. Littered in me head are a bunch of scars.
But it's a comically stupid story. He moves back with his brother. I think his brother's called John or something. And John, he's been running the farm while the other fella's been off in prison this whole time. And he's hired a farm hand to work there. And the two brothers are at loggerheads, and Brendan wants what's owed to him, which is nothing, but he wants back in on the farm. And then one day, John disappears. The farmhand shows up to work. He's like, "Where's the boss?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, he went to visit our aunt, and he won't be back for a while." And the man's like, "Well, this seems suspicious." And only a couple of weeks later, he's like, "I haven't seen John in weeks now," and this man's running the farm into the ground. And they found his torso in a bog a while later. Turns out there was no aunt at all. Jeez. But he came back and murdered the fella. But so Behan met him in prison. There was a story that on the night of his execution, Kerwin supposedly balanced like a glass of water in his hand to show how little of a fuck he gave with the fact he'd be hung in the morning. But during his practice run for the Pike Theatre, Behan would often pass out drunk, watching the play, and then just wake up in the middle of it, just shouting orders.
Same thing he was doing.
Same thing, yeah. Now it could be a mix-up from this story about
or they're both true.
Or they're both true, and that's just what he did. But so the theatre company had to come up with a plan, because it's tradition for the writer, director, whatever, to give a speech at the end of the play, especially on opening night. Like, we need him here. We need him drunk enough so he's not shouting at the play during the play, but not so drunk that he can't give the speech at the end. That was their master
the
plan.
old triangle.
Well, he did love doing that as well. But that's such a fine line to like get that man you'd get him so drunk he can't shout, and then immediately sober him up so that he can go up and give a speech about how good the play was.
It's the 3-point rule.
That man needed much more than 3 pints, I think. But they do it anyway, and it's a success. Everyone likes his play. The following year, in 1955, February 1955, he gets married to Beatrice French Salkeld, the daughter of an Irish artist, Cecil Salkeld. So she's very middle-class artist, especially compared to Behan.
A middle-class woman?
I know.
It's the opposite of...
It's the opposite of what he wants. But so that same year, the Olympia play refused to stage Behan's play, The Choir Fellow, because his brother Sean, who was working as an usher in the theatre, had been caught selling the Daily Worker to audiences during the intervals. A commie rag.
Is that the same thing?
That's the story. Well, so I think this is the story I was thinking of.
Or they're both true.
They're both true. So instead, in 1956, it was picked up by Joan Littlewood and brought to the Theatre Royal in London. So I think in a much previous episode, we'd made fun of this. Joan Littlewood's opening to that book.
It's because the intro is basically...
It does seem insane.
Firstly, we thought it was a man.
Yeah, true, yeah. Well, you thought it was a man. I thought it was an ungendered author.
We both thought it was a man, because you're like, this prick coming out here, the foreword by, and he just said, he kind of wrote that first one.
Yeah.
And I kind of did everything since then.
Yeah.
He just kept sending me scraps of paper that had sick on them and smelt of piss, and I had to just take the odd word that actually was written correctly, put it together at the end, and here you go, the hostage.
Yeah.
And
I move
then-
magic.
And then over a little bit of time, you realize,
This
this is maybe
a little bit of truth to that. Yeah. So, well, yeah. So this is where Joan, more scholarly men than us who've studied the works would like, did Joan dilute his work down to make it more broadly appealing to the masses? Maybe. Did she tighten up the writings of a lunatic drunk madman? Also possible. But it worked. So her version of it, I think there is more like, she adds different bits into it to make it a bit more palatable, but also still like edgy. But it's a big hit in London, which is, there's plenty of writers from this time. We hear them all on the list of Behan's people that he hates, but none of them have this sort of success outside of Dublin. So like Behan, this is a smash hit in London. It's now putting him on a success trip that the rest of them won't have. Like Behan, in episode 2, we'll talk about him going to America. He becomes a celebrity there. None of the rest of them had that sort of fame.
Yeah, they'd get fame later on, like post-death or even...
Yeah, when they're dead. But like, yeah, few of them become celebrities in their own time. And it's like, Behan's probably... Like, Beckett is getting success, but like, few of them become celebrities like he did. And a lot of it is to do with how this play was received in London. Same then as it is today. You can be as good as you want to be in Ireland. No one's going to give a fuck until you're good in London. But yeah, it's getting great reviews. The legendary critic Kenneth Tynan, no idea, he wrote of it, "It is Ireland's sacred duty to send over every few years a playwright who will save the English theatre from inarticulate dumbness." Now, he either said that or, "It seems to be Ireland's function, every 20 years or so, to provide a playwright who will kick the English drama from the past into the present." Maybe he said both. They're both quite similar and not particularly well written for a critic, but...
Yeah, but then they copped on, and they were like, instead of that, why don't we send over an Englishman to send back Irish plays?
Yeah. Send Martin McDonagh over to write Irish plays for us. Send the Viper over to give, the Hardy books, the greatest slice of Irish life ever produced on television by 4 English men living in fucking a fake town in Mayo. Yeah, it works both ways. But so later in 1956, he published The Borstal Boy as a serial in the Sunday Dispatch, as well as The Quairfell as a book. So now he's a writer. He's done it.
He's
got a smash play.
He can go back to France. He can be happy.
He can shove their faces at it.
But also now he's a famous writer, so fuck France.
So he's a writer, but he becomes a celebrity after appearing drunk on Malcolm Muggeridge's Panorama program on the BBC. Yeah. So this is the point where he goes from just another Irish writer who's good with the old pen to people are paying attention to him because he's a figure.
Because he's falling asleep on TV.
Basically.
And waking up and going...
Even now, that'd be funny to see happen. Like, there was that video of Joaquin Phoenix acting odd. Like, everything feels staged now anyway, but he was acting odd on the Tonight Show or something.
That was
very stupid.
That was specifically odd because Casey Affleck was behind... Like, he was doing that for like a year and a half, saying like, "Oh, I'm giving up acting. I'm just going to be a rapper."
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be true. Why does Casey Affleck have a camera and he's been following you around for a year and a half?
It's
and then they're like, "Oh, guess what? Surprise secret documentary. It was all a ruse."
Yeah. I don't know. But I guess the idea of like a actor or whatever appearing drunk on TV would capture people's imaginations now.
When Mark Wahlberg did it on Graham Norton,
that was amazing.
It was great.
People were watching that for ages.
Just trying to crack on to Sarah Silverman.
Yeah.
Yes, Mark.
Yes.
We would all do the same.
So yeah, like I was trying to wrap my head around this. It was like, oh no, if this happened today, it'd still be amazing. But back in the 1950s, like one does simply not be drunk on the BBC. Like it's all the same sort of. Like everyone has the same voice, and then all of a sudden there's not only like an Irish voice but a Dublin voice, and not only a Dublin voice but like an inner city North Dublin voice, and not only an inner city North Dublin voice but a drunk.
The more you sound like you're in a Roddy Doyle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the fucking Roddy Doyle. He's on TV. He's bollocks drunk. He makes some reference to needing to take a leak, which at the time scandalous.
But
people are loving it. So Mudridge later writes, One drunken, speechless television appearance brought more of the things he wanted, like money and notoriety and a neon glory about his head, than any number of hours with a pen in his hand. It made him a sensation overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably a good end of part 1 for us. Yeah. He's done it. He's led an interesting life. He's put some of those ideas of his prison time into the Queer Fella. He's got the Borstal Boy on the way. He's a writer, but now more importantly, he's a drunk Irish celebrity.
Yes.
And it's time for the downfall. So, yeah, we'll talk about that in the next episode.
Yeah, because what goes up must kind of stay there for a good couple of years.
Not even like he has his golden period is about 4 years.
Yeah, that's loads.
We mentioned it briefly at the start, but he's dead at 41.
Yeah,
he does not live a long.
You're
life.
saying 10% of his life he's a star.
He's a star.
A shoe shine.
So naturally enough, in the second part of this episode, you've got a drunk man. There's going to be a couple of
we've got the stories,
digressions.
Yeah.
He's famous for his witticisms, and there's lots of funny quotes that may or may not have been him. There's also a couple of other things that he may or may not have done, but they're less flattering. Anyway, we'll do all that in the second episode. This is the Borstal Boy series. It's not really a series, it's like 2 episodes.
2 episodes. But we did most of the serious stuff there in this one.
Yeah.
So now it'll just be fun stories of a man drinking himself to death.
Oh, it's not fun. It's going to be pretty hard.
Fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it fun. I'll have been on holiday. I'll come back fresh faced. Oh, let's sully a good man's reputation.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye.
Shafter.